Exercise 205, formulas and equations. In this lesson, we're going to be substituting into equations, and as a result of the substitution, we have to solve. Now, often, look, it's really nice to substitute t, put a number in for t and find d, but in today's lesson, we'll be substituting often the pronumeral on the left, and we have to work out the pronumeral on the right-hand side. So it is a substitution, but then it's solving equations as well. So just picking some questions from exercise 205. The number of days fresh milk will keep if stored at T degrees Celsius is given by the formula D equals 6 over T minus 1. If a carton of fresh milk lasted 4 days, at what temperature was it stored? Now, is that 4 days D or T? Yeah. So we're going to substitute D is 4. So there's my formula. D is 6 over T plus 1. So I get 4 equals 6 over T plus 1. In this question, the number of days it lasts is 4 and temperature is question mark. Because they're asking us at what temperature was it stored. They're asking something about the temperature. So, girls, this is a little bit of a tricky one. See this... It's 6 divided by t plus 1. Now, I'm going to remind you of something that you do in trigonometry over here. If I've got, let's say I've got tan of 30 equals 6 on x. How do you solve that, girls, if I gave you something like this? Don't solve it. Just tell me what you would do to solve this. No, what do you do with this x? Do you remember? Move it where? Up there. What do you do with the tan 30? You swap them. You swap diagonally across the equal sign. So when you've got, like you will see this sometimes in trigonometry. Like if I show you this diagram in trigonometry, just watching. If I asked you to solve for x in trigonometry, you'd go tan 30 is 6 on x. What would you do next? What would you do if the x was on the denominator? Flip it. You would, yes, you could flip both sides, or you swap the x with the tan 30. You would get x is 6 over tan 30. You swap diagonally. See, the divide by x becomes a times x, and this ends up down there. So you can swap across the equal sign diagonally. Now, the reason I'm reminding you of that is we're going to do the same thing over here. Or we can do it in 2 steps. I've got 6 divided by all of that, divided by t plus 1. What's the opposite of dividing by t plus 1? Multiplying by t plus 1. So I can do it in 2 steps if I want. How are we with that? All right, now what would you do? All right, so we're just going to say the opposite of dividing by t plus 1 is multiplying by t plus 1. Are we okay? All right, now you know what to do? What do you do now? You go 4t, what? You're going to expand? 4t plus what? Equals 6. 4t equals? 6 minus 4. So yes, numbers on their own belong together. 6, pick up the plus 4. Opposite of plus 4 is minus 4. 4t is 2. That means that t is what? What's the opposite of t times 4? It's t divided by 4? It's a half. All right, so I think that's probably the best way to do it. For those others that might be, look, there is an alternative method. I'll just show it over here, but you do not have to do it this way. But please just watch for a minute. Do you remember how I said Remember how I said if I had tan 30 is 6 on x that I could swap the x and the tan 30? Well, if I swap these, I get t plus 1 up there equals 6 over 4. Well, just watch, I'm nearly finished. T plus 1, what's 6 over 4? It's 3 over 2. So t is 3 over 2 minus 1, which is a half. That's the other way to do it. It's just to swap the t plus 1 with the 4. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You would only do it that way if you recognize that it was very similar to this, and in trigonometry we swap. If the x is on the denominator, we swap it with the other thing that can be calculated diagonally. A numerator-denominator swap, but across the equal sign diagonally. Or if you're finding that difficult and this makes more sense to you, this first method, then use the first method only. This is an OR method for those that are very comfortable with their algebra. Distance d kilometers that an observer can see to the horizon from a height of h meters is given by this formula. D equals 8 times the square root of h over 5. Which of the following heights allows you to see the horizon at a distance of 100 kilometers? Look, in multiple choice, I'm happy for you to try each of those as h. But you may not get this in multiple choice. So if it was multiple choice, you would try h is 358, work it all out. Do you get D 100? But WOMS, if you get this in extended response question, you have to know how to solve it. So we're going to solve it and then we'll check by substituting that it works. So if it was multiple choice, you could check by substituting, probably be quicker. All right, so which of the following heights, so h is question mark, allows you to see the horizon at a distance of 100. So I write the formula out and replace the D with 100. So I've got 100 equals 8 square root h over 5. Now, so 100 equals 8 something square root h over 5. There's a times in there. That is 8 times square root of h over 5. Pretend it's not square root of h over 5. So if this was just 100 equals 8 times x, let's say that whole square root thing was just an x, what would you do? You'd divide by 8. So we're going to divide by the 8. So we go 100 divided by 8 is the square root of h over 5. Now 100 divided by 8 I think is 12.5, is it? So 12.5 equals the square root of h over 5. Now I know we've got this square root. We've got to do the opposite or inverse operation of square root, which is square root. Inverse is squared. So we square both sides. Or what you're really doing is squaring both sides, or you just get, see, if you know a square root and a squared cancel, all right? Because look, just watch. For example, watch. What's the square root of 9? 3. What's 3 squared? 9. So really, the square root and the squared just cancel each other out. If I did the same, square root of 16 is 4. 4 squared is 16. A square root and a squared cancel. So, yeah, so it just becomes, so what you're really doing is squaring both sides. You know when we take stuff to the other side, and here when I'm dividing by 8, I'm really dividing both sides by 8. Because I go 8 divided by 8, 100 divided by 8, but the 8 divided by 8 cancels. So you can just go h over 5 is 12.5 squared if you're used to just doing it to the other side. Does that make sense? Yes. So the opposite or the inverse operation of square root is squared. So you might want to put that down. I don't want to say the opposite. It's the inverse operation. The opposite operation is squared. So how are we with that? 12.5 squared. Are we good? Oh, because you know how... Yeah. You've really got to do it to both sides. Because see, girls, an equation is balanced. And when an equation is balanced, if you do something to one side, you do it to the other. All right? So we're really squaring both sides. What do we get here? What's 12.5 squared? It's about 150 something. It's 62.5? 525? I don't know. Help me. 56.25 equals h over 5. Do we know what to do now? Yes. So 156.25 times 5 is h. Now, 781. Great. So, 0.25. So what's the answer? It's A. It's D, sorry. Now, listen, You know when you do this squaring business? Shh. Girls, you don't square until that square root thing is the last thing on that side that needs to be done. Do you understand? We move the 8 first. And when we get stuck with the square root, that's when you decide to square both sides. If you want to square both sides here, you've got to square everything. Square both sides. It's better to move the 8, deal with that. Just have, once the square root's the last thing that's holding you up on that side, that's when you square both sides. Does that make sense? All right? Index, BMI of an adult is B equals M over H squared, where M is the mass in kilograms and height is the H in meters, and Kate is 1.76 meters tall. Sorry, if she is 1.76 meters tall and has a BMI of 24.1, calculate her mass. So we're going to, we know that her height is 1.76. Her BMI, which is B in this formula, is 24.2. We need her mass is question mark. It's a good idea to write down, yeah, I've got H, I've got B, and I have to find this one, M. So I'm going to write the formula out, and then we're going to substitute. What's B? 24.2 equals mass over 1.76 squared. What do you think we should do first? Yeah, that's what I'd do. I'd work out 1.76 squared first. Or, you know what, you don't have to. What is the inverse or opposite of dividing by 1.76 squared? Timesing by 1.76 squared. Or you can, no, you leave it. That's just like 5 squared is 25. So girls, what's 1.76 squared? What is it? Help me, I'm not doing one. Yeah? So now M divided by that, opposite of dividing, timesing. What did you get? Something like 80 something. 70 something? Etc. But it's asking to the nearest kilogram. 75 kilograms. And from what we know on significant figures, you could go to 1 decimal place. Yes. Or couldn't you just do 24.2 times 1.76 squared is M? That's what some people have done. The inverse operation of dividing by 1.76 squared would be to times by 1.76 squared. And that way you get the answer without working this out here, etc. Are we okay with that? So if you want, I'll just put that here. That's your other way to do it. This is an or. The volume in cubic centimeters of wood in a tree is given by this formula. V equals 0.4724 D squared H plus 9.86, where D is the diameter of the trunk and H is the height of the lowest branch. All dimensions are in centimeters. Calculate correct to the nearest centimeter the height of the lowest branch, so they ask us to find H, in a tree whose trunk diameter is 55 centimeters, so that D is 55, and the volume is 400,000. So, are you okay with that? So, you know what some people do? They even, in their question, they just put a little D near that and they put a V near that so that they know which pronumerals are which values. Or you can do it on the side over here. So as you're reading, you should be putting, yep, I know that bit, they want me to find this. All right, let's start. What do I substitute for the V? What? Yeah, so I've got 400,000. I'm going to zoom in soon. I probably should have put the V under here, but it doesn't matter. All right. Equals 0.4724. Do I know D? Great. Times That's a times between the number and the d squared, times 55 squared times h. Are we okay with that? Plus 9.86, yes. Working this underlined bit out first because it's this number times that one. We've got 1, 4. Yeah. Times h plus 9.86. That equals 400,000. All right. Now that, I can put the times h there. I don't have to, all right? I don't need that times h. I can just put h if I want. What are you going to move next? Remember the rule, the golden rule, numbers on their own belong together. I know one of the numbers is a lot bigger than the other, but the 9.86 should move to the other number. That's a number on its own, that's a number on its own. It's not attached to anything else. It's not multiplied by a pronumeral or anything like that. So we're going to go 400,000 take away 9.86 equals 1429.01 times h. Now, what's 400,000 take away 9.86? 4 nines?
Yes.
Now I can put this times h, or I don't need the times. When it's a number and a pronumeral, you don't need the times. But what's my next step, do you think? I divide. See, h times that. The inverse operation of multiplying is dividing by 1429.01. And just be careful you don't mix the numbers up, because that's a possible source of error, is writing the stuff down wrong. And what do we get? 2790 point. Yep. So they want it to the nearest centimetre. Count 90, etc. 9079. All right, so we want the height of the tree to the nearest centimetre. So what have I got to the nearest centimetre? 280 centimetres. What's that in metres, girls? What's the height of the tree in metres? I'm just asking. 2.8. 2.8. A formula is used to find total resistance in an electrical circuit is 1 over resistance total equals 1 over resistor 1 plus 1 over resistance 2. Find the value of R1, so this one, find the value of that if R total is 15 and if R2 is 20. So I'm going to write it all out. So what do I put? 1 over what? 1 over 15 equals 1 over R1 plus 1 over 20. All right, girls, do I have numbers on their own? Yeah, 1/15th and 1/20th are both numbers. I know they're fractions, but that's okay. What's the inverse operation of plus 1 over 20? Minus 1 over 20. No. You need to use your calculator and work it out, because you cannot add or subtract unless the denominators are the same. You need to do it on your calculator. So it'll be 1/20th is smaller than a 15th. It'll be positive. What's the answer? 1 over 60 equals 1 over R1. Ladies, once you get to this, you don't need to know anything fancy. Are the numerators the same?
Yes.
Is the fraction line the same?
Yes.
That means the R1 has to be 60.
Oh.
You can only do that if everything else was the same. But if it wasn't the same, this is what you would do. I don't want R1 on the denominator. So this is where you can flip both sides. If you've got fraction equals fraction, you can flip both sides and go 60 over 1 equals R1 over 1. You can flip both sides if you've got fraction equals fraction. If you have fraction equals fraction. So see how I've got fraction equals fraction? I can flip both of them. Flip this and flip that. Are you okay with that? Now you can see that R1 is 60. Can you see that more clearly? Okay? Or you do a comparison. Now what I just did only works if the numerator and the fraction line are the same. Do you know, I'm comparing side by side. Yeah, that's the same, that's the same. Well, they have to be the same. I couldn't do it if I had 1 here and 2 there. Or 1 and 10, it wouldn't work. All right? Surface area of a rectangular prism. I'm just going to write it out here because you can't see it there. S equals 2LW plus 2LH. Sorry. I can't even see it properly. Plus 2WH. That's the formula. Now it says if a rectangular prism with surface area 132. This 132, which letter is it? L, W, H or S? Which? So that's S. Has length 7, which pronumeral is that? L. And width 3, W. Find height H. So you substitute. 132 equals 2LW means 2 times L times W. So that's 2 times 7 times 3 plus 2LH is 2 times L is 7, H is H, plus 2WH is 2 times 3 times H. Are we okay? That first step is just a straight substitution. Now wherever you can multiply numbers, you should. So I've got 132 equals. Tell me what to do, please. Times 2 times 7 times 3. I think that's 42.
42.
Plus, what's next? 2 times 7 is 14, so I've got 14H. Plus, 2 times 3 is 6. I've got 6H. Any like terms that if this was just an ordinary question that I gave you, what could you do with the 14H and the 6H? Yeah, they're like terms. You can add them and you get 20H. Now what do? You put the numbers on their own together. Keep the 20H on the right, please. Don't move it. What are you going to move next?
42.
The 42 moves. Is it plus or minus? Take away 42. What's 132 take away 42? Very good. 90 equals 20H. So what am I moving here? I've got H times 20. Is it? Yeah, I'm moving. I have to do the opposite of times 20 here. This is H times 20. Inverse operation of times 20 is divide by 20. And the zeros can cancel, and you've got H is 9 over 2. And what's 9 over 2, girls? It's 4.5 centimeters.